This is a candidate interview. I'm LP Phillips, KRLD News Radio 1080. In March, there was an election, a primary election, for the office of Dallas County Sheriff. A field of 5 candidates was whittled down to the top 2. Neither one getting 50% of the vote. There is a runoff election, and that's coming up May 28th. This is your chance to get to know the candidates. The 2 candidates running are first, incumbent Marion Brown. She has been the sheriff since 2018. Taking her on and wanting her job back is Lupe Valdez. She was elected in 2004, sworn in 2005, left office in 2018, and now wants it back. This is her interview. Let's start with, even though you have an extensive resume, introduce yourself to the voters.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate that. I was a federal agent before I'm a retired federal agent. An organization that no longer exists, U.S. Custom, became Homeland Security. I actually have a certificate that says founding member of Homeland Security. So I was I am a retired agent. And so after that, I went ahead and ran for sheriff. And so I have an extended law enforcement background. I think we added up about 45, 46 years of law enforcement, from doing basic jailer to going on to being a federal agent, to be et cetera, et cetera. So I have the experience of local, state, county, national, and international. So I have that vast experience. I like to say experience brings knowledge. Knowledge brings good decisions.
Why do you want your job back? You had it once, you left.
You know, I almost dislike that phrase. It's not so much that I want my job back. 10 months after I left, the jail failed. And shortly after that, I started getting messages not only from the officers working there, but from people that had worked in and out of the jail. And I kept saying, different management, don't worry, you'll get used to it, it's okay. And as the request increased, so did the information, such as 54 deaths during this tenure. I have realized it was COVID, but COVID's been over for over 4 years. We need to get past that and take care of issues.
How many of those 54 deaths were during COVID?
I don't know.
So the majority of them could have been due to the restrictions.
Well, let me put it this way. Just a couple of months ago, there was a fentanyl death. And I'm thinking, how in the world can there be a fentanyl death inside the jail? We asked for the autopsy report. And the report said something about, this is getting too common of fentanyl incidents in the jail. And this was in the autopsy report. And it goes back to what the officer is saying. There's no direct leadership. There's no oversight. There's no, I used to say, delegate but verify. You can't just do armchair management and expect everything to go well. You need to get in there. You need to go into the jail. You need to go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon as well as 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure that things are running the way they're supposed to be. Yes, there is people that are supposed to be doing things, but if you're in your office, they're going to be in their office too. They follow the example of the top. The top sets the tone. And so therefore, as you continue to make sure that things operate correctly, so will they. So and things have been going down. I'm sure you've heard how everything is fine and everything is running just great, but the jail inspections have zigzagged. Sometimes they pass, sometimes they don't. Except it just during that whole tenure, it was up and down. Now, when I first started, the first 4 years were miserable. The place was a total mess. It stunk. You could smell it a block down the road. It was unsanitary. And it took us 4 years to take item by item by item by item and fix it. After the 4 years, it totally passed every time. So to have it fail just 10 months afterwards says to me, somebody's not paying attention. Something is not going on. And so I decided to come back to try and take care of a lot of the issues that I've been informed that are not being taken care of.
When you say informed, you know a lot of the people who are still there. There certainly is transition. That office is the biggest in the county. Well, how would you judge the morale right now?
The way I hear it is, does anybody care? I sometimes think I spoil the employees by putting up signs as, the greatest employees walk through these doors, so prove it to me or show me. And I would go when they were leaving and thank them for a good day's work and actually tell me that they did I would say, you gave me a good day's work, right? And they would have said, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. So if they didn't do it that day, the next day, they were bound to give me a good day's work because they might think that I was there asking them. So I think from what I've heard, and I'm sure that the people that I hear from are the ones that are not only brave enough to say something, but are very uncomfortable. And I keep hearing us, we can only message you through a third person because if it gets found out, we're going to be in trouble. As long as there's been employment and managers, there's been disgruntled situations. And the first 2 years, I would say to them, you got to get used to it. It's a different manager. And then they would say, oh, you haven't heard about the deaths. No. Oh, you haven't heard about the lawsuits.
You mentioned the jail and it passing inspection. There have been calls to build a new jail. Where do you stand on that?
Well, that would be good, but you can't just build a new jail. You have to put the jail close to the courts, close to the probation. You're probably not aware that there's underground tunnels that go from the jail to the courts. And so if you build a new jail, you're going to have to do all of this somewhere else. You have the probation, you have the attorneys, you have the DA's office, you have the courts. So it's not just, you can't just say, let's move the chair. You got to move the whole operation.
So yes, no?
Yes, if you can move the whole operation. But I would also say you can't move the operation to a far off, distant area. It has to be sort of centralized to where all of the activity is. Some of our officers take the bus to work, and some of the people who visit the people in jail take the bus. You have to make it convenient enough so that the whole operation is within reach. It's a central part of the county. You can't put it out too far away.
Can Lou Sterrett be revamped and still come up to be a useful facility for the next 20, 30 years?
You can do anything. I mean, it's sometimes I'm aware that it's more costly to retrofit things than it is to start over. I have an old house, and when you try to retrofit modern conveniences, it's costlier than going out and building a new one. So I would assume the same thing would happen with the jail. And so the value has to be of, does it make more sense to retrofit it than to get the amount that you would be able to get for that piece of property?
What are your thoughts on chases? And I'm bringing this up because the Sheriff's Department, of course, is in charge of the interstates around here. And chases have become Dallas police have said, no, we're not going to do it anymore. They get on the interstates. What's your policy on that?
Now, remember, the Dallas police chases in residential areas. Rarely are the Dallas police in the freeways. So there's a little difference there in that the Sheriff's Department is on the freeways. We used to, and I'm sure it's the same thing, it's a safety measure. The person doing the chasing does not make the decision. The person behind them and can see a clearer view makes the decision of stop it. And we do make those decisions, stop it. In the sheriff's chases, if at all possible, there's usually one up front ahead trying to clear some of the traffic. Then there's the chase and the person chasing, and the person making a decision. The person chasing is very difficult for them to make a decision while their adrenaline is sky high and they're trying to keep up with the fast pace. They can't make decisions very well. In the residential area, that has to be one person, and it's extremely dangerous. On the freeway, that's not as much the case, but it can become extremely dangerous, and the person not doing the chase says, too dangerous, stop it.
So you're leaving it up to the officers to make the call?
Yes.
Because officers get involved in chases. Then you have as you mentioned, the freeways are far more open, but we always have construction, we always have backups, we always have an accident that may slow traffic.
Yes.
Maybe people standing around an accident site. Some would say chases are a thing that you really shouldn't do. If you've got helicopters or drones, break off the chase and make it a policy.
And that's where we're going. That's where we're going. You have the person up front, you have the chase, you have the person making a decision, then you have the drone or the person in the eyes in the sky. And if it's too dangerous, you just back off. And there's a joke in law enforcement. If the person's a criminal, they're going to do something again. There's going to be another chance to get them. If it's too dangerous and you can't get them right there, back off. You don't want to hurt anybody else, because that person is going to do something else. If they're crime-minded, they're going to do something else, and you're going to have another opportunity to get them.
How do you view the staffing of the Sheriff's Department right now, and what would you do differently on that?
Well, I understand that one of the things that I'm extremely uncomfortable with that they're doing right now is a 16-hour mandatory shift, which when some of the officers approach me, by the way, I run into them in the grocery store, at my job, in the filling stations. This is in the hospitals, the places that I have run into officers, and they stop and talk to me. And one of the things they constantly complain about is a 16-hour mandatory shift. And the thing I hear is, we have families also. We want to go home to our children. We want to have supper with our children. And so the 16 hours mandatory shift, I know it's like once a week, but that's still, you do a 16-hour shift, you're tired for the rest of the week. That one of the things I hope to do, I will do, is get rid of that 16-hour shift. Mandatory coverage, 24 hours. Yes, I understand that. It doesn't have to be 16 hours. It can be 3 8-hour shifts. It doesn't matter. 12 and 12, it's 24. You can do 12-hour shifts and not have to do the 16-hour thing. I think that was just a lazy way of taking care of that. Let's cover this. That's one of the first things that I want to change. The other thing is, when I first started, there was the jail was overpopulated, understaffed, under budget, and minorities routinely were beat up. So I came out with a system. First, you stop the hurt. Let's stop the hurt. Let's stop the beating. Let's stop all of that. Second, you change the conditions. Let's go in and clean up. We jet-powered the whole place. We painted it. We sanitized it. And then we maintained it. Maintenance is extremely important in a jail. It's a 24-hour movement. In your house, you may have a toilet that's used 12 times a day. In a jail, it's 12 times an hour. So there has to be routine maintenance done all the time. The third thing I did, besides the maintenance, and we set up a maintenance team that went around every single day, making sure that things were working, because they break daily. So you have to fix it and go on. The third thing we did is change the outcome. Not only do we need to change the conditions, we have to change the outcome. We set up job skill programs. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that stay in jail and do not make bond do not have skills. So we set up job skills and society skills, anger management, healthy relationships, fatherhood. Those were the societal skills. Now you go to job skills, machinists, welding, bicycle repair, dog training, commercial printing. And these made it possible for them not to come back. By the way, this wasn't on taxpayer dollar. This was on commissary funds, which and it was extremely successful. They did not come back. You make a decent living, they don't come back. I started off, there was 8,500 people in the jail. They were sleeping on the floor. There were mattresses all over the floor. When I left, and it took a while, there was 5,500 or 5,000. We got down to 5,200. That's quite a difference. Those people did not come back. You give them job skills, society skills, and you give them a better way, and you try to make sure they don't go back to their old environment, old systems. They don't come back. None of those are available now. My opponent's going to say, well, we have programs. You have to have job skill programs. Religious programs are good, but they don't do the job skills. You have to have job skills. And I actually ran into 4 or 5 people who would stop me and would say, because you put me in this program, I now own my own business. I didn't put them in the program, but they know darn well that the top sets the tone. The top decides what's going to happen. And they knew darn well that if I said, we need to find programs to bring down the population, to help the people get skills, that it was going to happen. None of those are available now. One of the things I'm going to do is bring those back, and new ones.
There is a pending case before the courts that has to do with immigration and Texas's new immigration law that leaves it up to law enforcement whether they're going to enforce it. Would you be in favor of your sheriff's deputies, if they have reason to suspect an illegal immigrant, arresting them, bringing them up, and possibly before a judge and having them deported?
Now, let me correct that a little bit. When everybody started saying that, I started researching. The law actually says they see the person cross the border. If one of my officers sees somebody crossing the border, they're on vacation, because we don't have a border here. They're going to be down south somewhere, and then they have to take them to the nearest location. The only thing that I can think of is flying in. But when you come
or
in...
Or trains.
But usually those check you when you board.
If they jump on a train that's... you've seen the trains crossing the border. You've got to have where there's the...
Yeah. Now, if one of my officers sees somebody jumping out of a train, I think they would try and check and make sure that it's not another situation.
If it isn't?
One person, the issue with all of law enforcement, not just us, not just the Democrat, is that if you start doing that, where are you going to put them? That's the issue. There's no funds attached to this. How many undocumented are estimated to be in the DFW area? And all of them will come through one of the 5 interstates here. What is there, over 500,000? Our capacity is less than 7,000. Now, the cost involved with that, if somebody wants to give us that kind of money, let's build a new jail. But you're talking about millions. Not even 300 million would take care of that. And so we have to be sensible in what we do. Law enforcement always has to be sensible in how they do the laws. And if you're going to arrest 500,000 people in the DFW area, you might as well hand me over your wallet right now, because none of you are going to have any funds left from taxes. And how are we going to do that? There has to be well thought out. And this one, I think the last I heard, the well thinking out was, okay, if they see them crossing the border. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense, because I'm going to be one of the ones stopped. And honestly, I often joke, and say, if somebody stops me and says papers and I say scissors, do I win? You know, I mean, this is kind of not well thought of. And any law, and I understand any law when it's first put out, you have to go through the challenges. I understand that. Every law that has ever come out, you have to go through all the challenges that happen. But this one needs to be thought out a little bit more.
As we said, first elected in 4, took office in 2005. You ran for governor in 2018. What do you say to those who say she wants to run for sheriff again to get another reboot, to find another office and get elected more?
I say they like to make up stuff. I'm not as young as I used to be. The reason I come back to the sheriff's department is mainly because I hear the cries. There's several cries, not only from the nonprofits, the officers, the people that work within the jail. I've had people come up to me and say, we used to run an AA meeting in the jail. We can't do that anymore. Are there other people running it? I don't know. But I do know that a lot of programs that were helping people not come back are no longer there. Obviously, I was not successful to run for governor. So why would I want to try that again? You know, the state is huge. My funds were a lot less than my opponent. But that's not something that I'm striving for. I want to come back and finish the job that I've started and do it correctly to where there's innovation taught within the department. Just the other day, and I watched 60 Minutes on a doctor that was talking about helping addicts get rid of the part in their brain that seeks addiction without opening up the head. And they gave an example, it's laser. And I'm thinking, whoa, is the future coming to this, to where we can do this? And if so, what do I need to do right now to get ready so we can have that? If it's not harmful, if it helps the individual, and they had trial cases and they put him in an addictive behavior, in addictive location, and they no longer had to have that. They zapped the part, I shouldn't say zap, I don't know what they did, but they did the part of the brain that seeks addiction. And it's experimental right now. And I am sitting there going, boy, if I was the sheriff, I think I'd text the DA and say, are you watching this? Let's think for the future. Let's get the things done now that we can take care of the future and take care of more people. Now, I'll be the first to admit there's people you cannot help. And I've always said, jails are for people we're afraid of, not for people we're angry with. If somebody breaks my car window and takes my coin purse that has $2 in it, I'm going to be upset. They broke my car window. Now I have to make arrangements to fix it. Now I have to take off work. Now I have to do all that. I'm going to get upset. But that's nothing I'm afraid of or something that's going to kill me. So we need to see if we can help those. If we can't, let's do it. But those that we can't help, then we need to continue the operation. But if there's constant people that come in, like the mentally ill, you know, I'm already working with 2 organizations that we're going to try to find a way to bring the person to a sensible stage and then turn them over. And then they can do their waiting to go to court somewhere else, not in jail. In the areas, and one of the individuals one of the groups that I'm talking with says, we have room. You know, we built it we thought there was going to be a lot, and we have room. And my question was, why aren't you in the jail talking to somebody? And he said, why ain't I in the jail talking to somebody? I said, you and I are talking. Shall I win this election? You and I are sitting down way before I take over. And we're going to look at ways. And this is what I'm talking about. Innovation, creativity. You have to teach your officers and your staff to start thinking that way, or else it's going to be like it is now, armchair management.
Coming up on May 28th, you're going to have to make up roughly 5 or 6 points. You're going to have to get 50% plus one in order to win. There's our voters, that camera right there. Give me your best 1-minute closing argument why they should vote for Lupe Valdez.
There's 3 things I'm going to do almost right away. First, for the officers, we are going to take away that 16-hour mandatory shift. Second, for the inmates, we're going to bring back programs that will help them not come back. And thirdly, for the public, we're going to stop these senseless lawsuits. I was started to tell you about one, but there's about 5 of them that should have never happened. For instance, the gentleman that got paid over $100,000 because he was kept in jail a little longer. My goodness, all you have to do, even if the machines aren't working, is look at the paperwork and save the public $100,000. The one that I love to talk about is we all know that there should be no discrimination against sex, age, religious backgrounds, cultures, all of this. Yet, somebody in their infinite wisdom, a manager, said, no women can have weekends off, only men. Now, what do you think is going to happen with that? Lawsuit. That's a federal rule. Management 101. No one should discriminate against sex. And to say to a whole group of women, you can't have the weekends off, only the men can. Now we're going to pay a $2 million lawsuit. My opponent's going to say it's an appeal, but that's a federal law. You can't do that. Management 101. They should have learned that. What I'm saying to the public is there's several like this that need to stop and save the public money.